Yeah, so I guess I'll just start with, getting to know you a little bit. So Martin, when did you graduate from college? Did you get out of school?
Oh man, it was back in the Stone Age, all right? Like there was no such thing as the World Wide Web. In fact, I don't think even the internet as it's constructed today was around. So we're talking late 70s. It's
It's
very
awesome.
different.
Yeah, I'm sure things were a little different then. So coming out of college, what was your goal? I'm sure you majored in something specific, but did you have a pertain goal that you were shooting for when you graduated and like a path that you saw?
I did. In fact, I was so committed to the goal of being a human resources manager
No.
that I spent a full year after graduating from college hanging on to that goal. And because I had no experience and I had no network, I knew no one. And remember, there was no World Wide Web, there was no email, there was none of the things that you take advantage of today to create
Right.
awareness, because it was an analog world. I've been rejected by 350 different companies in my applications
Wow.
over the course of that year. But everything happens for a reason. And I eventually was successful in finding somebody that took interest in my background, including what I had achieved as a student volunteer leader, to have given me the opportunity for a role in human resources management as a management trainee. And that set the stage for the launching of my career in human resources, which to this day is an area that I remain very involved in.
Great. Yeah, I was just about to follow up on, are you still heavily involved in that, or was that something you kind of faded away from after you got into dabbling with your startups and your businesses and stuff?
Well, you'd almost have to take me through different steps because all
Yeah.
the stuff that I do is in some way connected to human capital.
Right. So
All
let's
right.
take a step back and so once you got into your role, like you just described, what was the point where you realized that you wanted to go big and you wanted to dive into your business?
The organization that gave me my first and most important break after college was actually the Department of the Navy. And I worked for the Navy as a civilian
Wow.
and in the field of human resources. And early on in that journey, let's say within the first 2 years of that work,
Hmm.
they gave me the opportunity to work overseas. And I did not want to take that particular role because if I did, I knew if I stayed working for this government organization, the opportunities would look less attractive for me to work in a corporate role for which I had ambition.
Right.
But fortunately, I was engaged to someone that I met at Shippensburg and is my wife today, all right? Having just celebrated our 44th anniversary, all right? She's smarter than me, and she took advantage of the fact that our working outside the US would be a tremendous experience. And so we took that opportunity and thought that I would stay outside the US for a year or so and then come back and start trying to climb the ladder. Lo and behold, we stayed outside the US for about 7 years in both Asia and Europe. And when I
Wow.
returned to the US and landed in the San Francisco Bay Area, the what I feared was going to happen happened, and nobody would hire me because I had worked for the government for too long,
Right.
and I couldn't get a job. So point number one is entrepreneurs are generally not employable. All right, or you have to begin someplace, and it's good to get experience, don't get me wrong. But a lot of entrepreneurs begin companies because they either don't fit inside the way other people's companies work, or in some occasion now, especially with the tools that are available to students today, And the fact that you can create things using Shopify and other cloud-based services, there's just a whole range of things that can be done without much capital investment. And some people will start that journey much earlier. But after my lack of success in finding any corporate entity interested in hiring me, we then went on to look around. I spent time looking at entrepreneurial opportunities.
Right.
And because of my background in human resources management, things that were within that area was where my domain expertise is, and we will gravitate towards that which we know.
Yep.
So early on, the easiest kind of businesses to start, if you have some knowledge in any field, it's possible to be a consultant. And I knew very little about business models when I began, but somehow figured out being a consultant and being paid on the billable hour, I somehow figured out that's not really a good model, all right?
Right.
And so I knew I wanted to create something that would have the potential to grow beyond just whatever time I put in. And I spent a lot of time looking around for the right thing within the field of human resources management that would still be in line with my convictions of having an impact on the workplace, and be scalable. And I was fortunate to have stumbled across you might say a segment of a new type of business opportunity that to that point in time just did not exist. And I thought I was starting a small business when I began the company today called TriNet.
Wow.
But in reality, it was a startup. I just didn't know it was a startup. I thought I was starting a small business.
Yeah, that's great. So do you think that that's the case a lot of times when it comes to startups, that kind of realization after you kind of get it going a little bit, that you're like, wow, this is actually, much bigger than I initially thought? Or
I would say that the circumstances today are different than when I began, because the awareness of startups versus a small business are better understood.
Yeah.
And in the digital generation that you are in, the opportunity to look at things in the bigger picture out of the starting gate is much better today than it was even 10, 15 years ago. Like there's been a rapid evolution in both the awareness and the accessibility of the information and tools you need to be successful.
So if I am following correctly, so this is about three years after you got out of school, right? That you went overseas a little bit and then you came back to the US, and this is that like 3 years after school? Or
no, I worked for that 1 year trying to find a job, about 11 years working for Navy exchanges, and then started TriNet.
Great. So that was over 10 years that you were kind of just figuring things out and figuring yourself out and where your expertise fit the best. That's great. I love that.